So good evening. Thanks for coming. And so I'm Mary Ryther, currently Recycling and Solid Waste Coordinator at the Falmouth Department of Public Works. Some of you know that in the past, in a past career, I was a composter. So composting is just a little teeny niche of what I do now in my job at the town, but it's pretty exciting to be able to dip back into the compost world. And as I'll tell you a little bit more, that things are moving with compost now, so it's pretty exciting, and I'm happy to be able to help get things back moving in that direction. So just to be clear, somewhat apologetically, my purpose is simply to reduce the amount of solid waste going to the landfill. In my job, that's kind of what I'm working on, and it's really great that I feel like there are other parts of the community now that are stepping in to do education and outreach and community involvement. We've mentioned, Farming Falmouth is working on some things. Obviously, Carmela's here to talk about the schools. So there's a lot going forward. So I kind of apologize. I don't have time to talk about all of these things, but I do want to. But I do want to acknowledge that before we even talk about compost, we want to talk about source reduction. So this is a graphic which I borrowed from an organization called the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and some of you may be familiar with some of their other initiatives, but they have a community composting initiative among their other initiatives anyways. And so they produce, they have an annual conference of community composters nationwide, and they produce graphic materials and things to help move the projects along. So, and this is one of theirs, and I kind of added some larger text to it, but source reduction is the first place that you want to start. Okay, so I'm not going to get into that, but reducing food waste at the source. The next step would be food rescue, so using food to feed people, ideally, but if not people, then farm animals and I don't know, pets, but specifically, diverting large amounts to feed farm animals would be the next thing. Next on the step is home composting, followed by small scale composting, then medium scale, and so we work our way down. Centralized composting, and AD is anaerobic digestion. Again, that's kind of down low on the pyramid, the upside down pyramid. Mixed waste treatment, which is where you would be mixing with sewage. Again, not something that you want to do with food, because the food should be able to be put back onto the earth to grow food or healthy landscapes. And then last is landfill. So from my point of view, I'm just trying to keep it from here and compost, because that's mostly what is available to people here. So so again, we could talk all night about any one of those. So I probably don't need to preach to the choir on this one, but the benefits of local compost, and local is important here. Grow healthier, more nutritious food. So again, we know Farming Falmouth is working on that very specifically to create high quality compost. Black Earth is an awesome company, and we hope that they soon have a compost site closer to us. But at the moment, right now, our food waste that Black Earth is picking up is going to Wareham. So they're getting closer. It's no longer going, it was recently going to Framingham. Now it's closer. It's going to a site in Wareham, and more on that later. Reduce costs of hauling fertilizer to the Cape. Okay, so not only do we want people to not have to buy chemical fertilizer, but also just a simple cost both to the environment and to the economy of hauling. Reduce the use of chemical fertilizers. So chemical fertilizers are are often created with the use of natural gas. So we don't want to use petroleum products to make fertilizer if you can use compost. Improve local water quality. So again, applying it to the ground helps water quality by preventing runoff, slowing the water infiltration into the ground, and so on. Improve drought resistance for plants. So if you put it on your landscape, it will hold the water better instead of percolating through our sandy soil here. And then lastly, sequester carbon in the landscape. And that's not really something that people are doing here on a large scale, but in places with much larger pieces of land. I know California has a large carbon sequestration program where landowners can actually get federal money, or maybe it's not federal, but they can get money for applying compost to the land in order to sequester carbon. So that's, you know, there are all sorts of reasons why local compost is good. A couple of words about the terms that I use. MSW, for instance, municipal solid waste. It's a mouthful, so that's something that you'll see throughout my slides. Municipal solid waste is what is produced by residents. It really doesn't touch on restaurants or industry. So for instance, in my job, pretty much I'm just talking with residents about what, you know, their trash or their recycling at curbside. Businesses hire private haulers, and that's not really within my bailiwick there. Let's see, okay, so more on the numbers. So just to get a feel for what we're talking about here, the 2018 EPA estimate is that food waste represents roughly 24% of municipal solid waste. Interestingly, again, so this is sort of about the numbers. Everybody has a different number for it. Recently, close to home, in 2022, Black Earth Compost did a survey of municipal solid waste in Tingsboro, Mass, up in the northern part of the state. And they, you know, I don't know, took a week's worth or something, put it on the floor of a big warehouse and sorted through it. And they found that by their estimate, it was 46.5%. That also included compostable paper products, which probably the EPA estimate did not include. So this is all just to sort of warn you that the numbers are kind of fuzzy. They're big numbers, and I'm not really gonna talk about, you know, our tons of trash and recycling and compost, because it's just for the purposes of what we can grasp. We'll just talk about what we can handle. But it is also difficult just in record keeping. These are big trucks. They don't weigh everything. I have some slides later on about what is collected from our compost drop-offs, and those are just estimates. The truck drivers don't have scales. They estimate by the size of the container. Sometimes the container is full. It might be full of popcorn one week, and the next week it might be full of mashed potatoes, and they weigh very different things. They weigh very different amounts, but so you have to take the numbers with a grain of salt. Let's see. Okay, so in what year did we do this? Mass DEP, I will just read my note here. In 2021, Mass DEP published their 2030 solid waste plan. Mass DEP's waste reduction goal for 2030 is to reduce disposal by 1.7 million tons annually, working from a 2018 baseline. Again, the tons don't mean too much to me, except that it represents a 30% reduction in tons disposed of from the 2018 baseline. So, 1.7 million tons from a 2018 baseline of 5.7 million tons. Anyways, just say they're trying to reduce solid waste by 30% from 2018 to 2030. And that is, that's a goal that the Falmouth Solid Waste Advisory Committee is actively promoting. So they're promoting that, and they're working to get town policy to align with the state goals to accomplish the same or better results here in Falmouth. So just so people know, like, that's the state goal, and the advisory committee is trying to encourage the town to move ahead to meet the same goals in step with the state. Let's see. Oh, so to back up a little bit, so the EPA estimate was 24% of municipal solid waste being food. Mass DEP says that they think it's 21.5%. Interesting, Vermont has had a waste ban on food for residents since 2020. Vermont says now that their food waste is 18% of their waste stream. So they're publishing that finding because they're showing that they're now fairly significantly below. And then Black Earth comes and says, okay, 46, whatever. So again, they're all over the place, but Vermont's is quite low, and I appreciate that because it represents an improvement over what the rest of the country is doing. So when we talk about it, between the Solid Waste Advisory Committee and myself at DPW, we kind of look at 30%. And what's interesting about that is that the 30% if you could capture that 30%, that's what represents the state's goal. So if you, just in big general terms, if food waste represents 30% and the state's encouraging us to reduce by 30%, you could say, that would be the place to go after, because that's, in round numbers, kind of what we're going after. So what people are doing at home is important, meaning at home in your kitchen. So some people are diverting for backyard compost. Some people are feeding their animals. Some people have worm bins. Some people are doing bokashi. Is anybody here familiar with bokashi? Okay, well, it's a fermentation process. It's something you do in a bucket. It's big in like New York City because it's in a bucket with a tight lid. You put in, I won't even pretend to know exactly what you're doing, but there are people that swear by this. It's sort of a pickling type thing. It ferments it, and after a certain period of time, you can put it outside, similar to compost, and the food products have been broken down. So meat? It takes, all of that stuff. You can go and you can Google bokashi and learn about it. You can buy like kits online, and I think of it in my mind like sort of like sourdough. You have like an amount that you keep and you add to your bucket, and and it's anaerobic, so there's no smell. It's tight in a closed bucket. And as long as you're quick about opening the lid and putting the stuff in and closing it, it doesn't have pests in your home, no fruit flies or anything. Some people are using countertop dehydrators, and I want to say that is not making compost, but it is helps people manage their food waste. And if making it lighter and shredded up by the little machine on your countertop, then more power to you, because then you can, it's light, so it's taking weight away, and if you can manage it better, maybe putting it outside sort of in compost, then in a compost pile, then you can break it down differently. So then we have the idea of community drop-offs and then curbside collection service. The way I look at it is this is the easiest for people to do, And as you go back up here, the most difficult and labor intensive is the backyard compost. This could be considered the least expensive, and getting it picked up at the curb would be the most expensive. So in the way that the town is looking at it, we want to encourage as many people to do backyard composting as we can. And we do have plans to work on that, to promote that. But it's something that we have to think about and plan pretty carefully, because with limited time and resources, we have to figure out a program that we can manage and give people the help that they need for new people, introducing new people to it. So challenges to compost. So ick factor, I didn't make it up. That's like something composters talk about. The ick factor is simply that a lot of people just don't want to touch it. Somehow they feel like once it's food waste, it's been scraped off their plate, it's toxic or something. So that's a reason why some people don't do it. A lot of people don't have the right kitchen setup, they lack space, maybe they lack time to do it also. Some folks have, decades of food disposal habits working against why they might not be composting. Odors, pests, vectors. There's a lot of practical reasons why you may not be able to compost at home, and that are preventing larger scale compost sites from being located nearby. From a community point of view, having seasonal and a short-term population like Falmouth has, that makes it more difficult too, especially if you have people here that are renting for a week or a month at a time. Most of them are not going to take the time to take care of our environment here like they would at home. But there definitely are seasonal people, I would say people that own homes that are here for the season that do take advantage of our drop-offs and that do pay for curbside service. But sort of the more short-term rentals would be a problem for that. And then the big thing is the biggest challenge from my point of view is siting a compost facility locally. So that's, nobody is raising their hand saying, come and put it on my street. So that's a big issue. So on the positive side, progress. The other night at town meeting, Alan Robinson, who is the chairman of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, asked at town meeting how many people compost. And I didn't really see, I was watching on TV, I couldn't check the number of hands. But the number is growing, and a good amount of people compost. But how many, we don't know. So we are thinking seriously about doing a survey and putting a survey out there and trying to get a lot of, the problem with doing a survey is getting a wide variety of people to do it, and not just the people that are interested in composting. Because if you just promoted it to compost, and people that are active in local government and things like that, you would probably get not a good cross-section of the community. In August, I started a sign-up to use one of the food waste drop-offs, and I have over 200 residents signed up for that. So that's great. I now have people's email addresses, and I can stay in touch and give them updates about composting. So that is that's kind of priceless, because now we can reach out and we can ask people what they're thinking about and how we can help make it work better. About 300 people in Falmouth use Black Earth's curbside collection service, so they're paying out of pocket for that. Another big step is that the Falmouth Public School District composts. So Carmela is going to tell you about that, but that is a really huge help in terms of what I mentioned, the decades of habits that some people have. Teaching the school kids is such an important step to counteract that, and hoping that they can bring it home, and if their parents are resistant, they'll work on them. And then the next really positive thing is that the initiative that we call the Coastal Community Compost Initiative. That is something that is moving ahead now, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. So that is like the first really big news that something big might be happening soon. So the community drop-offs. So here's a picture of the waste management facility drop-off, which is in a shed just inside the gate at the Thomas Landers Road facility. And this is the new box that the guys at DPW immediately dubbed the Green Monster. As soon as they painted it green, it got that name, and it is kind of a municipal green, just like the Green Monster. And it's a big plywood box, and you can see it's got a lot of jewelry on it. It's got locks, and it's got signs, and we're working pretty hard to make it work. It's got a step up because it has to be big, because it's got these big containers inside. So there's a lot involved in that. It was a lot easier to put it in a shed where there are people sitting there and watching it all day. Mm-hmm. So there are smaller challenges just in its own. So let's see. So the drop-offs. Okay, so I have some numbers. I'll just look at my notes here for a minute. Okay, so I said approximately 215, that's 215, residents have signed up to use the drop-off since August. So that's pretty a big deal. Okay, so now I have numbers from October 2024 and then from 2023. So I wish I couldn't get it together to make a slide to show this, but we'll just say in 2023, a year ago, 1 month at the waste management facility, we collected 5,200 pounds of food scraps. So that was a year ago. This year in October, we collected 8,000 pounds. So that's significant. I don't have my calculator on me, and I didn't figure out what the percentage change was, but that's a big step up. So we do have statistics. We know that in 2023, 295 people or visits were made to drop off food waste at the waste management facility because the staff there has they have a tablet there. When they check in people, they push a button on what they're doing. So we got a compost button added a couple years ago. So we have that number from them. So that's 295. So this year we actually had 320 at the waste management facility, but we don't know how many were at the Green Monster. So our numbers aren't perfect. I suppose we could put a little button and ask people to say when you come and drop off.
I was going to say I can give you an estimate from personal experience. It's a lot.
Yeah.
There's always people outside. Always.
Yeah.
Always.
So I mean, I played with the numbers, and it kind of made my eyes cross because we know how many containers they picked up. We know the approximate weight of it, but we don't know how many people we don't know how many visits went to there. We don't know really how many of those 215 people that signed up are actually using one or the other. So it's all kind of vague. But point is, I guess the good point is that it's growing, and the amount is significant. The cost to the town, so the town is what was I trying to say? The footing the bill, that's it. The town is footing the bill for this. So October of 2024, the cost was $770 for this. And so, that might be 300 people or so. I mean, we just don't know really. Because of those visits, it might be one person coming, 3 times a week or something. We don't, we're not really sure. But yeah, so $770 for several hundred people to compost. So again, and so then the commercial curbside costs for a resident would cost $20.99 a month. So you can, again, it's hard to compare if you don't know exactly who is, who is using it and when. I should wrap up pretty quickly.
But what would that have cost if you dumped it in trash?
There you go with those big numbers. Yeah, I'm okay. So here's yes. So I do have one more line on that. So I'll jump ahead. We went on a field trip. Hello, why are we not?
Click on the screen.
Just
click on the pad and then move the arrow.
Oh, there. Okay, I got it. Sorry. So I can help a little bit with that. So last week, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. But last week we had a field trip, and while we were on the field trip, I asked one of the owners of Black Earth Compost, what would it cost if everybody in Falmouth, we just signed up all 20,000. We have about 20,000 what we call curbside eligible residences or households in Falmouth. So like when we got the recycling carts, we bought 21,000 of them. We distributed about 20, and we've slowly been redistributing one by one after that. But again, talking about big numbers, I said, so what would that cost? And he said, if you had 20,000 people, that would get our cost down to $100 a year per household. But then you do the math and you say, okay, that's $2 million, right? Unless I mixed up my numbers. And so then you go, oh, okay, so that's about what we pay for trash collection right now. Again, general terms, it's around $2 million for our trash contract for the year. So, there's an economy of scale because this is a small company with smaller trucks. But again, it lets you start thinking. So if we, just suppose we can't like wave a wand and make everybody suddenly be able to compost and be ready to do that. But if you did, for instance, then you could start collecting your trash every other week because the trash would no longer be, to use my favorite word, putrescent. If you took everything out of it that would smell, then people could have it around for 2 weeks.
And then we pay by weight for the garbage that's hauled off Cape.
Well, we pay by volume for it to be collected. So we actually have 2 contracts. We have a contract with Nauset Disposal to actually go around and pick it up, and that's the more expensive part. Our trash only goes as far as Bourne, where it's landfilled, and we actually have a very inexpensive rate. We pay about $72 a ton, which is significantly less than most towns on the Cape that pay over $100 per ton for trash because theirs has to go someplace else. And we have a sweetheart deal with Bourne because they need us, they need our trash.
Of that 24% of municipal waste, is that by weight or by volume?
That is by weight. So it gets complicated. Yes, that's an estimate by weight. Yeah.
There's got to be a way to make it cost effective for the town to do the right thing. So many other municipalities have been able to do that, have been able to realize savings in solid waste by keeping food waste local.
Well, we'll work on it, but it's challenging though. But one of the reasons it's extra challenging for us is that we don't have a compost site nearby. So the compost collection is more expensive for us because everything is being done relatively remotely, with more trucks on the road and so on. So I need to get going to to finish this up. But the really good news is that we have this regional initiative. So the town of Falmouth is actively working with the town of Bourne and the county and the leadership at Joint Base Cape Cod to site a compost facility at Joint Base Cape Cod. So for General Foe, who is the commander of the base, has agreed. He thinks it's a good idea. I mean, they try to do community efforts that will be beneficial. So he has identified a few sites. We're looking at one in particular. The county was granted grant money from an organization called the 11th Hour, something. The 11th. It's out based in Newport, Rhode Island. It's okay, never mind. 11th Hour gave the county an $80,000 grant to pay for a study. So SCS engineers are almost done completing a feasibility study for Joint Base Cape Cod site for the Upper Cape region. So for at least 4 towns. Sandwich and Mashpee at this point are sort of silent partners. They're all in, except that Falmouth and Bourne are doing the legwork on it at this point. And that's fine for now. So last week, members of the planning group, we visited 2 sites that Black Earth operates in the towns of Groton and Manchester by the Sea. The takeaway here is that these are somewhat state-of-the-art. This is the Groton site. It's been operating, I think, 5 or 6 or more years. There were chickens in there. The situation is that the trucks come in, they dump the food waste indoors, they bring leaves and wood chips and other carbon materials indoors to mix it around. They have very large air handling equipment that blows out, so it's negative pressure, it's pulling the air out, and in the slide on the right, if you see this, this big pipe, that's the air coming out. It's going into a manifold here and blowing into the ground into a huge bed of wood chips and compost. So it's a combination of kind of low-tech, high-tech. It's a big fan sucking the air out, but into the ground and through compost to take away the smell. And so outside of the building, you really don't smell anything. It's pretty remarkable. Inside of the building, yeah, it's a little stinky, and this is all sort of fuzzy. This is all steamy. It's kind of weird looking in there. And this is the big pipe up there. In the next slide, this is their newer building in Manchester by the Sea, and this is probably like 4 times the size of the other one. They both have a big fabric roof, lets in a lot of light. So during the day, they don't need lights. And here you can see all the ductwork coming around. So there's a lot of air getting pulled through it. And again, this one goes out into a big mound of wood chips. And after that gets saturated with odors, then they compost it. They scoop it up with a loader and they start fresh. So it was a pretty amazing tour. We had several members of the military there who right now are the really important ones that we need to convince. And they were very pleased with it. I mean, they said, you know, one of them actually wrote a letter to the commander, to General Foe, saying, this is just, you know, it was fabulous. And he actually said, you know, this could go in any town, anywhere, and nobody would be bothered by it. So that was really great news. I've gone over time. It's time for Carmela. I'll answer questions afterwards.
Okay.
Mary, don't forget to grab your flash drive.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute. No.
Thank you.
No, don't click on that. Stop. Okay. Hopefully I stopped it in time. Okay, so hello, my name is Carmela Mayeski, and I am the Learning Partnership Specialist. And if you don't know what that means, don't be surprised, because nobody does. Basically, it means I'm kind of like a community liaison with the science department, with the science classes, and also with community representatives. So I pretty much talk to and know everybody. Been in education for like 20 years, taught for almost 10, and now I'm an administrator. So the first thing that I wanted to mention, sorry, this is driving me nuts, is that if you haven't read this book called Braiding Sweetgrass, I highly, highly suggest it. It's by a woman named Robin Wall Kimmerer, and it's basically all about our relationship with Mother Earth. And it's from a Native American and also a scientific point of view, so it really resonated with me, because I'm a science nerd for life. But what she says is that restoration, which is what we're trying to do, is imperative for healing the earth, but reciprocity is really imperative for long-lasting, successful restoration. Like other mindful practices, ecological restoration can be viewed as an act of reciprocity in which humans exercise their caregiving responsibility for the ecosystems that sustain them. We restore the land, and the land restores us. And that's one of the most important things about composting, because there's a lot of studies that have been done recently that says we don't have that many years left of soil. The way that we do agriculture nowadays, we burn through the soil, we use it up, and then it's not fertile anymore. And then we add fertilizer to it to make it more fertile, so it'll grow more produce for us, when really we could be putting compost on it and, you know, completing that cycle. So these are my grandparents. I was named after my grandmother, Carmela. And I have to say, when I think about home in Falmouth, really I picture their property, which is now conservation. And the funny thing about, I was thinking when I was doing this presentation, that was my grandparents taught me to compost before I even knew what it was. So basically, all the food that they generated, all the coffee grinds, I do remember the coffee grinds a lot, went into a little bowl with a cover on it. My grandmother or grandfather would say, go take that and put it on the pile. You're younger than me, go put it on the pile. So I feel like they sort of introduced me to not wasting food, not wasting anything, as a matter of fact, and composting, and also taking care of the environment. It was very important to my grandparents. I'm very happy that their property is now conservation. Oh yeah, I see what you mean. It doesn't want to change. Also, that's another picture of them, which my grandmother would probably kill me if I showed you that, because she's wearing a hairnet. And
on the boat. They were on the boat.
On the boat. So why do we want to compost? Those are my parents, by the way, just in case you're wondering how they know. So again, at home, why do we want to compost? And again, remember we said the numbers are fuzzy? Yes. Okay, so the estimate that I got from the USDA says about 30% of our overall, oh actually this is different, 30% of the overall food supply doesn't even get eaten. So that's 1/3 almost of all the food that we put all the effort in to grow and bring and travel doesn't even get eaten, which is honestly a disgrace. And food waste, depending on who you ask, makes up approximately 22% of the waste stream in Massachusetts. So I'm a number nerd, I'm sorry, but so if we have 6 billion tons of waste in Massachusetts, that means about 1,400 or so million tons is food waste, and that's an awful lot. Now, when you're talking about schools, which is my jam, we're talking about elementary schools mainly, because the older kids are better understanding of what they want, what they can eat. Young kids, no clue. So a typical elementary school can generate about 18,000 pounds or 8 tons of food waste a year. And if you add all of the elementary schools in the United States, you're looking at a ridiculous amount of food waste. 530,000 tons, which is, I think that's 1 billion pounds of food waste. So again, a lot. And 45% of it, just like Black Earth said, they estimate that about 45% of the waste from elementary schools is food waste. And of course, if you're talking about places of business, 60% of the food waste comes from commercial. So it comes from restaurants, businesses, grocery stores. Grocery stores is a big one. And uneaten food costs this country $161 billion a year. So if that doesn't get you thinking about, geez, maybe we should do something about food waste, there's also a law in Massachusetts that if you generate more than 1/2 ton of food waste a week, You have to do something about it. So some people don't have a choice. If you have a nursing home or you have a restaurant and you're generating this much waste, you have to, by law, do something about it. So I'm a visual person. So that means all of the waste that we generate in 1 year, we could fill Fenway Park 75 times, which is very disheartening, to be completely honest. Now, this is just more statistics, but the one statistic that I really want to point out is this one. Okay, if we could divert that 30% of food that doesn't get eaten, we could eliminate 50% of the food insecure households, just like that, with just 15% of the food. And I know for a fact that some of my kids go home and they don't have something to eat. And it's absolutely inexcusable that we throw food out when we could be feeding those kids. So, one of the things I hear all the time is, well, we really got to do something about fossil fuels. That's the problem. And I agree with you. Yes, that is a problem. However, if you're talking about fossil fuels, everybody jetting all over the place in their private jets, actually food waste makes more greenhouse gas emissions than all of the planes in the world. It's actually 6 times more. So all of the greenhouse gases emitted from just stuff rotting in landfills is like 37 million passenger vehicles, 37 million cars driving around, putting carbon into the atmosphere. So yes, absolutely. Do you need to drive less? Yes. Should you fly? Yes. Yes. You know one thing you can't avoid? You have to eat. Everybody has to eat. You can't not eat. So it's an easy thing to fix. So one more thing, just to show you numbers, like I said, is if food waste was a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases behind the United States. And as a matter of fact, for those people that say, well, what about cars? We need to get, electrification. I agree. However, if you're looking at numbers, which I'm not sure why the bars aren't showing up, but if you look, just behind road is food waste. So the thing is, I can't tell you don't drive to work. I can't tell you to do this, but I can tell you a quick, easy way to just compost. It's not difficult. So we're going to talk about growing our program. So we started first with 1 school at Mullen Hall in 2023, and we did a pilot program. And then that went so well, the superintendent said, hey, we can do the rest of the schools in like a year, right? Like, we don't need 2 years to roll this out, right? And I said, sure. So, she was right. But let me tell you, it was an interesting year. But we did. So we added a school on every month or every couple of months. We'd get them ready. I'd go to the school. I'd prep the kids. I'd walk around at lunchtime, and I'd ask kids trivia questions about compost and about food waste. And most of the time, they're like, no way. Yeah, that really is the number. And also, I gave them candy, but we won't. Okay. We won't tell the wellness people that I did that. And also, now everybody is composting. All 7 of our schools are composting. They started the beginning of the year composting. So when we started doing that, we're like, okay, this is great, but it's not enough. Let's do something else. So we got rid of all our single-use silverware. So now we use stainless steel, like back in the old days. Like you do at home. Most people wash their silverware and reuse it because it makes sense. You're not buying new silverware. So we started doing that last year. We got some of our schools started. This year, all of our schools are doing it. Also, we said, there really isn't a good compostable tray because of PFAS contamination. We'll just go to the old-fashioned reusable trays. And so we've switched to reusable trays. We've bought reusable plates and bowls. So, we're going back old school the way things used to be, where things got washed and they got reused. Now, was this a problem? Yes, because a lot of our dishwashers had been sitting for a very long period of time. So what did? We fixed the dishwashers, and some schools we actually had to purchase and reinstall dishwashers. So we did. Also, we got a lot of feedback from kitchen staff. We are too busy for this. We can't handle any more work. And they were right. So we hired more staff because we realized that in order to do this right, we needed more help. So we hired more staff. Now, after we did that, we found out about a program called Farm to School. So the Farm to School program is actually a really cool program that tries to increase the amount of local food and home-cooked food that goes to our kids. So not only are we cooking more homemade meals for the kids that are cooked in the schools, we also have a community chef. Her name's Laura. She's fantastic. And also anything the woman touches is delicious. So she comes in, she does taste tests. We have produce, like a produce harvest of the month it's called. And every month she does a taste test at all of our schools with our produce. This month it was kale. And let me tell you, she made kale taste good. Next month it's carrots. So every month it's a different produce, and so they do a taste test, and then they also do a meal cooked with it. I think they did tamale pie with the kale. So we're bringing in more fresh food. Now, hopefully in the future, we can go to a steel cow, which if you don't know what that is, when you go to Cumberland Farms and you put your cup underneath and you go like this and it puts the milk in it, that's a steel cow. I didn't name it. That is what we'd like to go to, because you can't recycle milk cartons. Also, you know how everybody's like, oh, boxed water, it's better. You can't recycle that here, right now, right?
Right.
So we need to get rid of that, because we have a huge amount of waste that is just milk cartons. That right there could alleviate a lot. And then the other thing that we've done is we have in every single grade from K through grade 9, we have a experiential learning experience that has to do with sustainability and environmental stewardship every year from K through 9. Why do we stop at 9? Not because we wanted to, but after 9th grade, there are really no common classes that all of the kids have, so you can't really do a district-wide activity. However, up until grade 9, every single year. So when we started talking to the kids about microbes and composting and saving the environment, they knew what we were talking about because we'd been talking to them about it since kindergarten. So this is some of the things that we did. We had kids make posters because I'm a lousy artist and they're not. So they made posters of what goes in the compost and what goes in the trash. We have the green monster. Now I'm proud to say that was built by one of my ex-students that I had when he was in 8th grade. And he graduated last year, and him and I think 3 or 4 other young men designed, cut, and built that for us. So every time I look out there, I think of Colin, because he built it with his friends as their senior project. So every time I go out there and every time I put compost in there, I'm thinking, my kids made this, which is pretty amazing. Now in Mullen Hall, we have this lovely little thing, looks like an aquarium with 3 sections. So this is a compost viewer. So what we do is we challenge the kids to bring in food and put it in here. And what happens is it gets covered with dirt, and very quickly, whatever they put in disappears. It decomposes. However, the spoon remains. Why? Because plastic takes thousands of years to decompose. 3rd grade, we do a relay race. This year we did recycle versus trash. So I literally gathered a bag of trash and recycling things, gave them a trash bag, and their relay was they had to grab something out of the bag, they had to run, and then they had to figure out, is this recycling or is it trash? And they had to do it as fast as possible, as accurately as possible. And I'm going to tell you, they learned a lot about what can and cannot go in the recycling, as did I. So fun activity. Last year we actually did compost versus trash versus recycling, so it got even more complicated. And then of course, the gentleman that you see standing to the right of that is actually Alan Robinson, who is the chair of the Falmouth Solid Waste Committee, basically training the kids how to do composting. So it's been amazing. The other thing is we bought books for the kids, and when community members found out what we were doing, they contacted us and said, what books are you buying for your kids? Because we want to buy books for the Falmouth Main Library. We want to buy books for the East Falmouth Library. So the thing is that as soon as people found out what we were doing, everybody wanted to help, which is really amazing because you can't do what we do without community support. It's just not possible. So for you all, start at home. It's fairly easy to compost at home as long as you're turning the compost. It's pretty straightforward. These are actually all links. But of course, if you're doing it at home, you can really only do vegetable and fruit scraps. You can't do meat, you can't do milk. Black Earth can do everything, which is why I love that. So this would be the most environmentally friendly way, right? Okay. However, I look at this and go, I do not have time to do this. So that's why we have black earth. So do I have time to compost with black earth? Yes. I will tell you, one of the reasons why I suggested the administration building was because it's in a perfect location in the middle of town. It's also where I work. So I knew if it was there, then I could bring my stuff, put it in when I go to work, and no extra traveling. So yes, I will admit, don't tell Alan I said that, because that's a secret. He thinks, oh, that was such a great idea. I know. Anyways, he's gonna watch this and be like, I knew you had ulterior motives. So if you do black earth, right, a home doesn't generate that much waste, right? So you could work with your neighbors, and 3 or 4 houses could team up, pay for one bin. You could all put compost in it, and it would be $20 for 4 houses. So I won't tell Black Earth, I promise. And they even suggest that. So I live in a condo community. We could actually get a couple of bins for our whole condo community and have everybody chip in on the monthly fee. It's not that hard. I haven't started that yet because my condo people scare me. All right, anyways, so the other thing is that compost with the people you work with, compost with your church, compost with your community, like get together. It's $20 a month, it's nothing. So work together. Also, if you're like, you know, Carmela, I'm sorry, but I just don't have an extra $20 a month to pay for compost. I know, which is why we have this. So come compost with the clippers. Do clipper compost. So come to the administration building. You're heading that way anyways to go to the grocery store. Pull in, wave to me in my window, drop off your compost, and be on your way. And it's free. And if you live in way out in East Falmouth, you can go to the waste management facility and you can drop it off there. So I want to talk to you a little bit quickly about the results. So we estimated, this is our estimate of what pounds per day per student, okay? So elementary students, 0.161 pounds per day, which sounds small, but it adds up. So, but we actually found out that our kids are actually 0.118, so we're a little bit lower than what we anticipated, which is good. We're actually lower on all of the things. So that means we're wasting less food. However, we're still, last year, with all of our schools, in 180 days, we generate 53,000 pounds of food waste, or 26 tons. Now, that's fantastic. We've saved 53,000 pounds from the landfill, but that's a double-edged sword because then you think about it as, oh my God, we generated 53,000 pounds of food waste. So it's a good starting place, but we've got some work to do. Now, this is the really exciting part. So food waste that goes into a landfill, when it decomposes, it does it without oxygen. It gets buried, there's no oxygen. So it's something called anaerobic. And when you break down things like that, they give off methane. Methane is one of the worst greenhouse gases there is. So by putting our food into the landfill, we are literally sealing our doom by making all this gas. When you do compost, because you use oxygen and you turn it, very, very little methane generated. So that means in 1 year, we're preventing the equivalent of 19 metric tons of carbon emissions just by composting at the school. And I'm gonna tell you, it's not a lot of effort. It's very easy. And also if you're like a visual person, that's like 3 T-Rexes, 5 elephants. Is, you know, I taught 8th grade. You got to put dinosaurs somewhere in the presentation. And also, if you're wondering, wow, a metric ton of carbon dioxide, I wonder what that looks like. There you go. That's what 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide looks like. Yeah, you see all those little things down there? Those are people. So 19 of those. That's what we save by composting in one district. And if we could do this in every district across America, the amount of carbon we could save us. So, again, I love this sentiment, I always have, but we are borrowing today from our kids' future. So it is our responsibility that when you know better, you do better. That's my superintendent, that's my favorite saying that she says to me, and I love it, because when you know better, you do better, which is why we're doing this, because we know this is better for our kids, we know this is better for our environment, and that's why we're doing it. So now, here's the caveat. You now know better, which means it's your responsibility to do better as well. So I hope you will join us and start composting. Also, if you're interested, that QR code will give you a copy of my slide presentation, if you're interested. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about the logistics of this, like how many bins in the cafeteria for the kids to use, how many bins in the kitchen, and then what happens to those bins weekly?
Yep, so really complicated, ready? We have one bin in the cafeteria, one compost bin in the cafeteria, except for the high school, because they have 3 cafeterias, so that's a different situation. But they still only have one compost bin. So we have one compost bin, a Black Earth tote. I think it's 48 gallons, like the mid-size one, or 32. We have that in there. The custodians bring it out during lunches. We keep the lid closed so that trash doesn't get thrown into it when we're not paying attention. We also have smaller ones, like 32s, that stay in the kitchen, that the kitchen personnel use. At the high school, we have one in the culinary arts classroom because they use it. So we have one there, one in the kitchen, and one in the cafeteria. So usually 1 to 2 per school, and then they give us multiples. So once one gets filled up, or if it starts smelling really bad, which by the way is not an issue, we just trade it out. So at most, like 4 per school.
So you never have to empty those totes until Black Earth comes in?
Correct.
How
Correct.
often do they come? Just
Once a week.
Once a week.
That's what we've got right now. That's all we need. Once a week is more than adequate. They can come as many times as a week as you need. So some of the, if a restaurant was doing it, they might need, like Mary and I were talking about this earlier, they might need to have them come multiple times a week, but that's fine. They can do as many times as you want. So. And if you have questions for Mary too, because Mary didn't get to answer questions, so feel free to ask either of us.
Well, another question is, if you want to use the Green Monster or the landfill one, what sort of container do you bring your food waste in?
Good question. So at the Green Monster, we ask that people have their compost bagged either in a certified compostable plastic or it can be in a paper bag. And the reason for that is simply to keep the area clean. And I have at least once had to kind of go in and move things around. I think you may have too.
Yep.
And it really helps that things are in bags so you can, because since we have 2 of them, and we have a little sign when one fills, we have people, but at any rate, sometimes we need to sort of move things around a little bit. So some people in the one at the waste management facility, we don't care if people bring it in a bag or not, and some people just bring their their countertop little pail and dump that out. I mean, myself, I either line it with usually just a brown paper bag on my little countertop one, and it keeps it a little bit cleaner. But
Yeah.
that's
The compostable plastic bags, are those generally available at
Yes.
grocery stores, et cetera?
yes, now.
Now they are, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they're available
Yep.
now and on Amazon. We
It-
just tell people to
yeah.
look for the BPI certified, or there may
Yep.
be another one.
And I do see food just dropped in this one as well, just put into the barrel, which is fine because Black Earth has a big bag that lines the entire barrel. So if somebody says, hey, do I need to put this in a bag? Technically, no.
Yeah.
It's fine. And I usually put it in a bag, but like I have rabbits at home, so sometimes when I dispose of the hay, I just dump the plastic bag in there, hold the bag and let the contents fall out because I don't have a bag big enough to put it all in there. And it's fine. Oh, and by the way, dog waste? No. Cat waste? No. Rabbits? Yes. So just FYI, if you're thinking like, I thought you couldn't put pet waste. You're right, except if you have rabbits, then yes.